and welcome to Mintcasts, our MintPress podcast series. I'm Mnar Muhawesh, editor-in-chief of MintPress, and I will be your host. Thanks again for joining today's conversation, where we will be discussing the state of the media in the United States, how independent and alternative media have helped revive truth in reporting when it comes to topics like Gaza, Ukraine, corporate welfare, Big Brother, money and politics, the military-industrial complex, and many more topics the corporate media won't dare touch. A recent Gallup poll showed that over 70% of Americans don't even trust the media and feel like it's not working in the interest of the people, but rather in the interest of advertisers, corporations, and government officials. So what happened in the last 20 years or so that brought such a decline in Americans' trust in the media? Here to talk to me about this and much more is Abby Martin, host of RT's Breaking the Set, who has been receiving international acclaim for providing an alternative and truthful perspective to issues the media is failing to cover accurately and thoroughly, like Gaza. On her show, Abby emphasizes the need for independent journalism and calls out the corporatocracy that controls America. So tell me a little bit about Gaza Coverage, because you've basically been leading the way. You've made your show, you've dedicated your show for the past about 3 weeks to Gaza and bringing attention to the human rights crisis. You've brought a perspective that most of the media, corporate media, has failed to provide. Why did you do that?
Well, I saw, as we know, as you just kind of prefaced this whole conversation, is that the media has been deteriorating really crudely. I mean, it's just unbelievable when you look at the landscape from the last 10 years till now and how we have 5 giant corporate conglomerates controlling 90% of what Americans see, hear, and read. And of course, coverage of everything is going to be superficial and sensationalized and biased, but I swear to God, I have never seen anything as disgusting as the coverage with this latest conflict. And I mean, not being Israeli, not being affiliated with any sort of, religion, whether it be Islam or Judaism, I'm kind of looking at this from a completely outside perspective and seeing extremely just obvious truths that aren't being relayed on the corporate media. And initially, when this happened, I've known the context for a while now, that it didn't start with rockets shooting from Palestine into Israel. So knowing that context was kind of omitted was a really glaring distortion for me. So when you see the corporate media just kind of pick up and say that Israel has the right to self-defense against these incessant rocket attacks, I said, well, that's really odd in itself, because you're missing kind of the last 16 years of what's been going on there. And on top of that, it was just so vile on the dehumanization of Palestinians. I've never seen anything quite like it. You can point to different conflicts like the stenography that was going into parroting the claims from the establishment with the Iraq War, selling that, but man, I mean, this latest thing just really shows you where the loyalties lie and how much they want to demonize and kind of dehumanize an entire population of people, millions of people, just lump them into all being terrorists who deserve to die, apparently, because they elected Hamas. And to me, it's vile, it's disgusting, and I've tried to commit my show to showing the other side. And yeah, hell yeah, I'm biased. I'm an advocacy journalist. I'm not going to sit back and claim that this is an equal fight when I know it's not.
So you're an advocate for the truth and for the human perspective. Let's talk a little bit about the neoconservative media that you kind of just brought up a little bit ago. Who is controlling the media, and why do you think that there is this enemy, which are these Muslims, these Arabs, whether it's in Palestine, whether it's in Iraq, or wherever it may be in the Middle East today?
I think that we've seen enemies contrived till the end of time. My brother and I just did this really extensive piece, historical piece, about the quote term human shields. This wasn't just invented now by Israel. I mean, it's been used back since World War II and beyond. And really every time you're looking to demonize a population and consider them having no value for human life, these terms are resurrected: militant, terrorists, using human shields. And so it kind of gives people, I guess, the solace in sponsoring massacres, I guess, over the years. So I think that the military-industrial complex has become so powerful and centralized that they just need to have this enemy manufactured in order to justify constant warfare. I mean, it's completely obvious to me. We just come up on the 50th anniversary of the Gulf of Tonkin attack. We're talking about an attack that killed millions of people in Laos, Cambodia, and Vietnam. That never happened. Like, literally, we found out in 2005 that it never happened. Like, this attack on the Maddox in the Gulf of Tonkin was fake. Like, you can look at almost every single justification for getting into war, and it's usually either completely fabricated or like a false flag or something. And it's atrocious. It's outrageous that our leaders are so war hungry that they will justify whatever they can to conduct imperial warfare. This is a tale as old as time. And ever since 9/11, they've seized the hell on that event to just demonize all Muslims, all Arabs, and basically go to war with the entire Middle East. It's pretty shocking, Mnar.
So, just moving on with that subject, let's talk about your statement about Ukraine. Ukraine is all over the news right now, especially with the recent airline that was shot down. You released a public statement. You basically said it on air, and you said, the coverage I've seen of Ukraine, and I'm paraphrasing here, the coverage I've seen of Ukraine has been truly disappointing from all sides of the media spectrum and ripe with disinformation. Above all, my heart goes out to the Ukrainian people who are now wedged as pawns in the middle of a global power chess game. They are the real losers here. Why did you make this public statement?
I made this statement because working at RT, it's really hard when Russia's projected in the news, and also just the world's telling you to hate Russia and to blame Russia for everything that's going on. I think it's really cheap and really just disrespectful to people who are involved in the conflict that the U.S. has absolutely nothing to do with. I released a statement because that prior weekend, I saw like all this military maneuvering on the Ukrainian border, and you have RT saying one thing, and then you have the corporate media just saying something just completely insane. And I was just like, at that point, I was just done with everything. I was like, I'm not even taking a side at this point. I'm just rejecting the military culture on both sides. And I had known, I mean, I'd just done this podcast with my brother about kind of this buildup in Ukraine sponsored by NATO forces, investing $5 billion in the ground. What the fuck are we doing? I'm sorry, but like, what in the hell does this country have to do with these kind of silent coups and the maneuvering over the years, investing our money that we need to be putting in here in Detroit? Our infrastructure is falling apart. $5 billion being thrown away on these like color revolutions in other countries that have nothing to do with us. Eastern Europe, it's like, the whole like Cold War fear of like the Soviet Union and the domino effect. Look at what's happened. I mean, it's been like the reverse effect of that. The US has gone and kind of seized all these post-Soviet Cold War states and trying to like garner control of them. Looking back on it now, it was a bloodless secession. Obviously, people in Ukraine identify with Russia a lot. They voted to join. I don't know how fair the referendum was. I'm not on the ground. There's only so much I can say about what's really happening in Crimea and in Ukraine because it's just really foreign to me. But I've been trying to learn a lot, and I think that looking back on it, I mean, Representative Ellen Grayson was just like, wow, if only all of the U.S. maneuvers could be as bloodless and like peaceful than the Crimea incursion and like subsequent secession was. That's his words. But it really does show you the perspective of like, the U.S. can go and kill 1 million Iraqis, zero accountability. Russia moves into a territory that's like literally on the border that they actually do have like heavily invested in, and the world goes effing crazy. Sanctions, all this stuff. So, I mean, I still stand by everything I said, and I stand by what I said about the Flight 17 rebels shooting down the plane. I mean, if it indeed were the rebels, we don't know any of the facts. But the point is, the corporate media loves to point figures and takes these sides and pits everyone against each other and paints these new enemy forces. And I think that the Middle East was almost like a stepping stone for these neocon hawks here. And I think Russia and China are the real prize. And we know that. I mean, it's written in their mission statements in these think tanks. This is why DC is so surreal, because you can literally just be like, oh, okay, who are all these idiots behind like Liz Wall's resignation? And then you're like, oh, they're all like these neocons working at this think tank. And you're like, oh, what is this think tank about? And you're like, oh, they want to resurrect the Cold War with Russia. They just wrote it out, like in their doctrine. You're like, oh, well, I guess that's what's happening. It's like it doesn't take much to just peel back the layers and see how insane and insidious all of this is, but it's really not that hard to figure out. And I mean, it's very cut and dry. These people want to start a Cold War. They want a hot war, rather. And Bill Kristol, the guy who essentially helped get us into Iraq, is the lead of this new think tank. And he's, he doesn't like a war-weary public. He wrote about how we need to get the American public ready to go to war again, because going to war against a country with a nuclear arsenal is a really good idea. idea.
So, Abby, I hear a lot of passion in your voice and a lot of emotion coming out of you, which is honestly, it's very rare to come from a journalist because we're taught as journalists that we need to maintain objectivity, not be biased. What do you say to that? What do you say about when we're taught that as journalists?
Well, luckily I was never taught anything as a journalist because I never went to the J school establishment where I learned like how to be a journalist. I've talked to, all my friends pretty much have here in DC, and they're like, you know what? It's like going to art school. It's like at the end of the training, you don't even really know how to follow your gut and how to like react to certain things without kind of being like maybe overly unbiased and trying to portray like so many different sides. And to me, I see enough of that. Honestly, like I love journalists like Glenn Greenwald and people who are completely put themselves out there where they don't have to tiptoe around things that are literally like illegal, like criminal illegal things. I don't need the State Department perspective. Like I don't need the White House line to compare what I'm seeing. All I want is the facts, and I love seeing the passion and emotion behind it, especially if it's an issue that's like super cut and dry, like NSA spying. That's unconstitutional. It's illegal. And I love people arguing vehemently that are journalists that I just can identify with much more than someone who's trying to kind of like toe this balance. It's like, dude, we don't have time to waste. Like you can sit there and try to like toe this like impartiality line, but like to me, time's running out. We need to hold these people accountable. Our country's falling apart. Look at the rest of the world, perpetuating warfare, destruction. Like, it's time to tell the truth and to risk everything that you have to tell the truth and to get that message out, because that's the only way we're going to change what we're doing. And I think a lot of people resonate with the way that I'm conducting journalism, because as like coming from this really hardcore anti-war activism and then documenting the Occupy movement, like I'm like militant in my beliefs, man. Like I'll just put it out there and I have zero to hide. And I think that at this point, knowing this kind of retroactive prosecutorial possibilities that they have with like spying and data mining, I'd rather put out exactly who I am and what I think so they can't screw me over later and try to frame me for something. I mean, if it gets to that point, it's scary to say that, but I'd rather just be completely honest about everything that I've done and everything that I think. Because I just think it's time to just be completely. If you want to push for transparency, then be transparent yourself.
Absolutely. And, we're both women journalists, and you speak out a lot about these kinds of things. And I know that I've come under smearing and labeling for, my religion, my background, et cetera, et cetera. What are some of the biggest struggles that you face? I mean, I know your Wikipedia page has been changed like 1,000 times. What are some of the struggles that you face as a woman journalist who's speaking up in a very male-dominated workforce?
A lot of struggles. I mean, it's struggles to be taken seriously because you're always going to be criticized with how you look and act and sound, where I think you're under a lot more scrutiny than a male would be maybe saying those things. But I love the challenge, and I love like having this female energy and bringing the female perspective to the table. And I love challenging people's preconceived notions about like, gender and all these things. But it's been really hard in terms of my past because I have a really controversial past. I was involved in like 9/11 Truth and the Occupy movement. So those are stigmas that when you come into this like professional plastic DC city that everyone's kind of expecting you to go this like very professional route, and that you are just chastised and criticized if you are involved in any sort of like alternative or radical movements or questioning official narratives. How dare you? That's not what journalists are supposed to do. But then like people like David Frum and Jamie Kirchick, who basically are like official propagandists, they just have an unlimited platform across the corporate media to just continue to spout BS. So when you kind of compare the two, you really realize like why things are the way they are when these people are seen as legitimate, and then like people like you and I are, ostracized because we, like made people question things or covered issues that weren't popular. And I think that's really coming to an end, because I think people really see the charade, especially outside the bubble. It's kind of hard where I am because I still feel like I'm one of those radical voices out there. But I think outside of this little bubble of DC, people really get it, and they really crave real truth, and they don't want people, feeding them bullshit.
Let's talk about your Wikipedia page, because actually, my MintPress's Wikipedia page has been, it's been out of control with the edits, and it's just pure propaganda, whoever's editing it. So I kind of just left it alone and kind of ignore it now. But I know your Wikipedia page has been edited over and over again. And I actually went through the edits and saw a lot of the edits that they made, and I read through them, and I couldn't help but notice the labels that people just kept trying to put on you. How do you react to something like that?
I think it's a badge of honor, man. I mean, when you have people in the House of Representatives trolling my Wikipedia page, trying to call me a Russian propagandist, I think it's hysterical. And really, what more validation do you need to know that there's some like troll in the halls of Congress like screwing with your page? But before all this Russia Crimea statement that propelled me to the mainstream for the wrong reasons, because they wanted to tout me as some like anti-Russian hero before they realized that that wasn't going to happen. Wikipedia had actually taken down my page because they said that I wasn't a notable figure because I hadn't been written up in enough corporate publications, which to me defeats the whole purpose of this decentralized like online Wikipedia encyclopedia that anyone like it's like a growing source, you know. And when you have so much being reported on outside of that corporate structure, I found that odd that they were using that as their guidelines and criteria for who's like a notable figure and not. So I reported it before all that stuff went down, just saying like, that's really funny that you have kind of these hyper admins, like these super editors at Wikipedia who discern like who you know, if you're worthy or not to be notable. And then after the floodgates open, you do see the narrative even being spun to make me discredited on there, you know, promoting all the stuff that I said 7 years ago about 9/11 and embellishing that as if that's like my main thing, and just trying to discredit me with like conspiracy theories and like something that I taught, like the Israel coverage. It was just like, yeah.
She's anti-Israel.
Yeah, it was like, oh, and she has an anti-Israel bias according to da 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 da, and it's like all these like Israeli like state like publications, and I'm like, that's so funny that that's like what you put out there when you can point to any subject and I've rallied against it and railed against it, no matter who you are, no matter what it is. If it's for truth and justice, I've been there trying to be on the front lines, calling attention to it. But that's what's put out there to define you when someone wants to take you down and wants to make you just seem like a joke. And I think people are much too smart to fall for it anymore.
And my last question for you, Abby, is you've overcome a lot. You know, you've really risen above the crowd and you speak up, you're not afraid, you hear passion when you speak, which is admirable. What do you tell young journalists who are trying to pursue journalism, who are told that they need to be, again, objective, biased, and they need to start in a local news setting, you know, all of those, you know, typical journalism codes that they give the new journalists? What do you tell those journalists who really want to speak truth?
Yeah, I tell them times are changing, man. Just everything's online, decentralization. We are completely driving the corporate media structure into irrelevancy. It's dinosaurs dying a slow death, and they're just desperate for ratings. It's sad almost when you look at CNN, and there's 17 weeks of the missing 370 plane. I mean, how many times can you really cover a ghost plane just because you're trying desperately to hold on to these ratings? And to me, it was just a very natural evolution where I just wanted to provide content on a really aesthetically appealing website because I felt like there was a void of kind of this alternative media that wasn't too fringe, but was also veering outside of this mainstream thought, even the alt media thought, where you're kind of breaking through that two-party paradigm and navigating through a lot of different things that I feel like people need to hear. It's issues that Americans need to know in order to change our own country and to empower ourselves to actually start change from the grassroots. And it's a very natural progression. Just, it's so easy to start a blog, to start a website. And if you can get on the cutting edge and just go out there, be a citizen journalist, there's things happening all around you. You don't need to report from the top down. You don't need to have a White House press pass. You just need to go out in your community and get galvanized and start reporting on issues that actually affect you and the people around you. And that will bring you so much. And that's what happened to me. And I think that if you just like hone in on the issues that speak most to you, hone in on that passion and just start reporting on it, becoming a citizen journalist. And there's so many avenues that you can take: podcasts, blogs, Twitter, Facebook. You can start whatever medium you want because it's all about the new media. We're in a revolution of consciousness. We're in a revolution of ideas, and be a part of it. It's open to you. And we're all here to embolden each other and to raise each other's voices up and to get the truth out.
And I love that. I mean, it's all about the passion, because without passion, we can't bring truth, right? And
Absolutely.
I have to ask what your cat's name, because it's she's in the background.
Oh, this is Tails, and I have another cat, Cleo, and they're just kicking it right here.
Okay, there you
So
go.
they're like I love them so much. They make my life full of joy.
Well, good. I'm glad to hear that. So, well, that's all, Abby, and I really appreciate you coming on for today, and keep up the amazing work. We all watch your show. We think it's amazing, and we appreciate you bringing truth into journalism and bringing that passion, because, again, it's very rare to find.
You can find this podcast through our MintPress iTunes channel, but the conversation is far from over, as we'd like to hear more from our readers and listeners about Gaza coverage and Ukraine and the need for independent journalism and how to read between the lines when getting a neocon spin. You can also post on our Facebook page in our comments section to our pinned post featuring this podcast. And make sure to like this video on YouTube and subscribe to our YouTube channel for more Mintcast interviews. Thank you so much for listening.